Today, we're joined by Gal Borenstein, the founder and CEO of the Borenstein Group, a leading B2B and B2G marketing agency based in Washington, D.C. With over 20 years of experience, the Borenstein Group specializes in branding, marketing, and public relations for tech companies in defense, cybersecurity, IT, and more. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Welcome, Gal.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure having you on the podcast, as always. So let's start from the top. How did you get Borenstein Group started?
Well, it's a very fascinating story, but it really is an American immigrant story. I was born and raised in Israel, and I came here after finishing my military service as an international student. I went to Temple University, communication, and got a techno MBA from George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, only to find out that in 1991 and 1992, there was a big recession. And because I did not have family around me, I did not have a network of colleagues that most people have when they kind of live in the same area for 20 or 30 years. I found myself accepting a marketing assistant job for 28, which at the time was the same of what today would be $40,000 maybe, but it was a salary of a receptionist. But the gift that that job gave me was the ability to see how the employer that I had, who consisted of all engineers and all telecommunication management type of people, dealt with complete geekery, if you will, or nerdship. And I was their translator into how technology would make it simple for people that are buying to understand. And when I invited ad agencies at the time, being the marketing manager for the company, help. We typically did three things. They first send the president of the company to the first meeting. Then when they found out that we're not spending $500,000, they basically send the lowest on the totem pole, which was a great insult from a client perspective, because they didn't know anything about telecommunications. They just knew that they have to get something creative going. Right. And the second was really they did not pay attention to what technology companies do. They had very specific dogmas and how things should look like in business to business, which wasn't the case and wasn't really relatable if you took it to the marketplace. And the third really was personal attention to commitment and a passion to your clients. So I looked around and I said, I'm not going anywhere in this job, even though I had very supportive bosses. And I said, this is my time to actually see what's out there. So at that time, there was something that was called an extended visa check, which was essentially a two-step check with one of the credit card companies. And in very, very small letters, like 6-point size letters, they would basically say every time you cash it, it's $500 on top of the $2,000 and 20% interest. Wow. I took that and the belief that I can do better than what other agencies were doing, and knowing that it's not possible that you have only 4 or 5 or 6 agencies at any given time in our area in Washington, D.C., that all claimed that they were great in technology marketing and PR. And yet the small to middle market companies that were kind of starting to pop out after the kind of initial world where there were only IBMs and nothing else, suddenly I saw an opportunity and I said, what are the small to middle market companies doing if they're a technology company? And the answer was shortly nothing. It was either nothing or having a marketing assistant that just literally graduated college and are learning how to create a newsletter at a time or how to really kind of create marketing communication slicks for the company. And I said, what if I could develop a model where I could walk to any CEO and say, for the amount of money that you would pay for your receptionist, you will have an ad agency on a retainer that will create customer newsletters, press releases, and everything else. And I thought to myself, well, that would be kind of a good test. So a month later, I just basically had my first brochure, which at the time was the website, and I didn't even have an office address. So what I did is I created a brochure that had slits with a cutout, so I can put a business card with an address as I move on from one place to the next. Smart. I called it the Borenstein Group because who would believe that a 25-year-old at the time doesn't seem to have anybody around him coming to a meeting? I called the Borenstein Group because at the time there were analyst groups called like the Boston Group and the Yankee Group and the Aberdeen Group and a bunch of them. And I said, well, if I called the group, people would assume that there's more than one. And while in my head there were multiple people working for the Borenstein Group at the time, that was me. So I was able to get starting from getting a startup client to becoming kind of an advisor and a strategist to multiple technology companies. And just to give you kind of a scale type of answer, which I'm sure most entrepreneurs would love to hear, is that, from a $28,000 salary, annual salary at that time, I finished my first year with $150,000. It was really kind of almost kind of like, wow, I did it by myself. I did it with that stupid loan. And what do I do now? So the answer was, I have to hire people. Right. And the thing is, I never actually had experience in managing other people or managing people, period. I was always a writer. I was always an intellectual person that you would bring into the room to listen or to contribute. And suddenly here I am having an agency. And then really kind of the next step in that evolution of the Borenstein Group was really to start having all the accoutrements, if you will, that somebody that wants to be successful would have. So my first car was a lease of a Mercedes Benz. I looked at it as my real estate investment because at the time where people were meeting face to face or going to lunch, if you are driving like a Fiat or a Chevy, nothing wrong with it. But what are the chances that this company is really successful? So that became kind of my justification for leasing and using that as my real estate budget. And all these things really kind of led to hiring people, hiring creative directors and public relations specialists and all these different people. But it was all based on the concept of creating a company that looks 10 times bigger than it is, but at the same time providing 10 times more value than most ad agencies that had a very big bureaucracy where you have a junior account executive, project manager, and at the end of the day, it was overhead versus delivering it. And the CEOs that I was working with at the time told me, I never had a president working with me. And it's so much value that I'm getting that let me give you more. Let me recommend you to other technology companies. So really kind of the company was born out of the need in the marketplace that I identified, and then creating a niche where I'm not competing against large elephants, if you will, but I was actually competing with the idea that we specialize in something that others people don't. We deliver the service in a very specific way, and we're always competitively affordable, no matter what the situation was. And that really kind of how it started.
Wow. So it's from humble beginnings, but it seems like you were scrappy. It seems like you took an
Yes.
opportunity wherever it came to you, and you said, "All right, I'm going to make the most of this." And you just started making some smart moves to get ahead, move ahead, somehow find a way.
Yes.
So that's the beginning, and it seems like the happy ending, right? But can you tell us a bit more about like the size of the company that you're dealing with now, like who you're now working with? Because I think you're working with enterprises now, not just small and medium-sized businesses, right?
Yes. So 29 years later, the company has been in existence since then. And now the Borenstein Group really work with what we would call the middle market and some enterprise clients that have specific divisions that still don't have the answer of where they get help. So in many ways, on one side, the company really has not changed its model in the sense of being always kind of affordable and competitive, but being lucrative because other competitors can't understand how is it possible that we're delivering a service with low overhead, with high quality, and most importantly, integrating all the communications that they need without hiring internal people that just would ask us, what should you do? So with that said, the technologies have evolved over the years. It used to be the dot-coms, which later became the internet, which later became application service providers, which later became really cybersecurity, data analytics, information technology, telecommunications, all the way to AI used in multiple products and services. Our niche specifically is business to business and business to government. And that is a function of the fact that Washington, D.C., the largest customer in the world that procures anything from a pencil to a pen to a cake to a system of technology is Uncle Sam. And these are called mostly government contractors. But in reality, they're the most advanced technology companies that are out there because especially on the DoD side and military side, the military and DoD always are looking for the same solution that has a different edge to it. And that edge is coming from experimenting with small to mid-sized companies that are willing to take the risk of not getting paid, even if the technology doesn't work. But that's really how it works.
Right. So the government being the largest consumer or purchaser in the world, I mean, it's a big statement. I wonder, what is it like to deal with Uncle Sam as a client?
Again, to be clear, the government is not our client, but it's the catalyst for our clients to create innovation in government.
Right.
So what it is like is really kind of, if you think about selling to an enterprise, but now multiply it times 1,000 in terms of the difficulty of distinguishing between the stakeholders. You're not selling to one person or one department or one head of anything. You really have stakeholders, you have influencers, and you have people that their job is to do procurement and their job is to say no and then negotiate their way back to a yes, but they need options. So understanding kind of the buyer persona is really at the core of what our customers need and we provide. So to give a very quick example, if somebody's selling advanced analytics to the government, they can have the perfect product or the perfect solution for a division of agency A, for example. And they're thinking, well, we can help the government even save money. We can help the government be more efficient. And in reality, what happens is they're thinking about the general, they're thinking about the program director that is managing the enterprise there. And what happens in reality is that you need to get your message out not only to the program manager or the head of the agency, you need to also talk to the people that are using technology that is antiquated, that could be easily replaced, make a lot of progress. And the most important part is defining yourself as an innovator in this market is not necessarily a good thing because the larger the company, and this applies to business and to business to government in this case, the larger the client is, the less risk they're willing to take.
Right.
Whether it's the legacy of the person that selected the technology. So imagine going back 10 or 15 years to today, and somebody has to make the decision between going with an open-based platform to do Word document management or using Google Docs, and Microsoft or Google or maybe something else. Which spreadsheets are you going to use? How are you going to use AI to increase the productivity of what you're doing and freeing up people to do something? Well, the person is making that decision at the top is thinking, is this going to be my legacy that will bury me in terms of my reputation because they picked the wrong technology?
Right.
And most people ignore that. Most marketers basically think, well, we have the best solution in the world. It's going to improve the agency or the enterprise. And therefore, why wouldn't you buy from us? In reality, it's a completely different ballgame.
Right.
Knowing the buyer persona of the person that is actually influencing, that it's psychological concerns that are legitimate, that basically wraps into a whole kind of framework that allows the company to really then position itself as a partner to its customers, and then connecting the dots between the needs that the company has and then what are the outcomes that they will get out of it. And that's really one of the specialties that we have. We use psychology very often to understand and reverse engineer a proposition. And my favorite adage that was developed over the years, I didn't invent it, I heard it somewhere, so I'm not going to take credit for it, is really the fact that in order to be successful in technology, you got to have mystery that produces the margin. And the rest is telling a good story. But with that, if you're not able to kind of go beyond the technology, you're never going to be successful.
Because it isn't the technology that people really buy. It's the story.
People never buy the technology, even when they buy the technology. They're buying from people.
Right.
And when we say people, it's not an individual, but at the end of the day, there's got to be a human connection on some level. Most of the time in what we do, it means understanding the needs, individual needs of the decision maker and what's going through their heads, and then connecting it to the buyer persona of the enterprise that has a CFO that their job is to say, no, we don't have any money to engage again in something. Engaging with the person that says the CTO or CIOs are typically the persons that are thinking about, well, if we change this, what are we for? Why would we be needed? Right. So that prevents technologies from being approved in almost every sector that you can imagine that I've worked with over the years. So the pace of change is a question of, again, great marketing and great strategy, and then making sure that whoever we work with as a client, whether they're small, is making them look safer choice versus making them look risky, because the risk aversion goes all the way to what Wall Street does. And I know you have some experience with Wall Street, and if you're basically hedging and you're putting yourself in a position where you're almost day trading your marketing, you can be lucky, but most of the time it's a question of creating a system. Right. And our system is called Making Creativity a Science, which goes to the heart of our industry. Most people think of an ad agency and a marketing agency as a place that you have great ideas to share. Right. So you have a big idea, and that's where people are hiring you or buying from you. And what I found out that with engineers and scientists, because they are thematic thinkers, they're logical thinkers, they're linear thinkers. Right. If we basically created a connection between a great idea that can be replicated and create predictable outcomes, right, the definition of science, suddenly you can actually scale whatever is the idea into something much bigger. Because otherwise, everyone is creative. Anybody can have a good idea, but if it doesn't scale, that's not the economy, that's not capitalism, that's not how America is built.
Right. Exactly. Well, so I mean, you threw a lot out there right now, and it seems like to sum it up, the government side of things, the software vendors or the technology partners that end up innovating on behalf of the government, your job is actually to make them look as risk-free as possible, and it really comes down to size in a lot of ways, right? Yes. But it also comes down to the way that the American government thinks about things. So then on the flip side, it's like, okay, so when these technology partners that you have to make look risk-free, you also have to want them to make sure that they actually are risk-free, right? But then to convince them to become your clients, you have to show them there is a scalable, big idea here behind you and what you're all about, that in your word, not in your word, but like to your point, like that you know how to actually convey better than anybody else. Is that the right summary for?
It is. And it's fascinating because, again, every time I look at marketing agencies, digital marketing agencies now, nothing has changed much in the sense of sense and sensibility. There's got to be a common sense understanding, obviously, of what the technology that you're selling, whether it's advanced analytics, cybersecurity, AI, enterprise IT. But at the end of the day, you have a value proposition that differentiates yourself from 100 other companies that are exactly in the same place where you are, selling to the same group of decision makers. And if you can differentiate yourself and you are thinking also of only outside or inside out. You miss one of these two, you're likely to fail. And the clients that we work with, even when they're say we're ready, we have everything that we need, we tested everything, it's really going to work, I basically have to play the devil's advocate and say, well, here's some not so nice questions and answers that I need to believe. And until you get to that belief point, you really don't have a game.
Right. I mean, how do you get to that relief point with, I guess, like small and medium-sized tech firms? Like, what have you experienced so far?
Well, there's always initial, especially when it's engineer run versus venture capital assigned CEOs. There's a huge difference, obviously. The venture capital assigned CEO is looking at 5x and 10x and 20x and reports to a board, and that's a completely different process. But to the average entrepreneurial engineering and technologist-based companies, again, they're looking at how they're solving a problem. And there's an industry joke. Sometimes the technology companies create solutions in search of problems.
Yeah, they do sometimes.
Instead of doing it the other way around, which is having an actual need that is resolved by their solution.
Right.
So the top three things that I typically start with is, number one, reverse engineering the process and saying, well, why wouldn't we need you or your company? The second is making sure that help the CEOs of these companies understand that the market is not just defined by needs and by statistics, but the actual behavior of their competitors. Do you want to be defined by what you say, or do you want to be defined by what your competitors say about you? It used to be as easy as a networking situation or lunch. Now it's being replaced by what people read about your company, thought leadership, content. Are you in all the right places in LinkedIn? And all these different things create a stage where the smallest company in the world, if it has thought leadership, it can become somebody that people talk about. And I think that really kind of is how even the OpenAI companies that are now kind of our Perplexity and all these different companies in AI that is now kind of like the new industrial revolution have started, is they basically say the world is not flat and here's a different way. But then it took a translation period for people to get it to a point where they understand that. For example, I heard of the CEOs of these AI companies mentioning that right now we're in a stage where we have a brain. AI is kind of a brain, but it doesn't have legs and hands and fingers and toes that I can actually coordinate. And that's kind of the bots that will be coming and changing the behavior. So whatever the idea that you have, you got to really look at it from the outside in, not only from the inside out. And if you're not willing to listen, if you're only stuck in your dogma, even when it's an innovation, you're very likely going to lose the game.
Got it. That's very wise words. Very wise words.
Thank you.
So in terms of growing your business, I mean, what sort of thought leadership are you putting out there right now? What sort of like marketing strategies are you seeing actually, get you the traction that you're looking for? Have the conversations that you want to have actually.
Well, for us, really from the beginning to where we are now as a leader in the top 50 business to business agencies in the country, it's just a third party validation. It's not something that we made up or said about ourselves. It really is about building thought leadership that actually matters. And I want your listeners to, and viewers, of course, to really kind of understand the difference between developing garbage content, where essentially you're asking an AI to write a piece about the new innovation in information technology, blah, blah, blah. And then essentially it generates 300 words or 600 words or 900 words of something that has no origination and nothing new that you can actually use. Versus taking an existing industry problem and writing about it. Our kind of mainstay, number one, is to be able to produce thought leadership pieces that I publish a lot on LinkedIn, which is a tremendous tool for credibility. And because it's not only what you see and what you read in the article, you can also see me and other people in the Borenstein Group and really kind of understand who we are and then connect the dots. It's almost the equivalent of what a book is on Amazon versus a book in a bookstore. In a bookstore, you're likely, if they exist in your area, you might get a untrained 1,000-hour employee that could care less what your interest is in history of the dinosaurs, right? And if you go on Amazon, you will see hundreds of reviews, good and bad, stars, and then you can actually see what other books exist on the history of the dinosaurs, which provide, again, third-party validation. So our main effort is always to not talk about ourselves, but talk about the specific issues that today or tomorrow will impact how people do business, how they market, and then parlay that into content that is meaningful. The other main channel that we use is through the books that I write. I wrote 3 books over the past 15 years. My latest one just came out in January of this year, which is called Don't Believe the Hype, which is all about how CEOs should re-examine their communication style in a world where if you're communicating something to employees, the rumor mill that used to be the water cooler is now basically a conversation that's happening in SharePoint or in Slack or through another channel that the CEO never sees unless he has somebody spying on them, which is wrong.
Right.
But at the same time, it happens every day. Employees that leave the company, what kind of reviews are they leaving on Glassdoor, for example? That defines your brand as much as anything else.
Right.
And then applying it to bad news, good news, and then being a CEO, how does it look to the outside world when you're misbehaving and putting pictures of yourself drunk or in a party on Instagram just because it was fun? But it's not necessarily the fun that your target audience is looking to see.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with fun, but again, today we live in a digital world, and trust is a very vulnerable commodity, and you have to monetize it. And the way you monetize it is to really think, who am I trying to communicate with? And then building a system where no matter where you are in a corporation, whether it's a financial department or an HR department or a product development, whatever you say exists in an ecosystem that actually allows it to be credible, to be strategic, and to be relatable to the audience that is judging you. Because you are being judged all the time, every minute, every second, and you can't delete it.
Right.
You can always go to webarchive.com or many of the other kind of places that can retrace your steps and see that you had a completely different picture erased from your profile.
Exactly. So then don't believe the hype. CEOs really need to start thinking about communication beyond the conventional or previous convention of analog in on-site type of rumors, but they have to actually start thinking about how does digital communication factor into the perception of a brand and how their actual brand, their personal brand, actually reflects on the business as well.
Yes.
Right.
In fact, to paraphrase what you said, which was on point, is really to say what's your digital footprint looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And that basically goes beyond what you say. It's about what people say about you. It's about whether you're looked upon as a thought leader or you're looked upon as just a follower. Liking things is nice, but eventually, if you have no idea to add to the conversation, you're not going to be at the table where decisions are being made.
Exactly. And to your previous point about AI quote unquote slop, right? Well, you have to bring something new to the table. It's about thought leadership. Thought leadership means bringing new thoughts and leading with new thoughts, right? So
yes. Yes. In fact, there's a saying that came from General MacArthur in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, if everybody thinks alike, somebody isn't thinking. And that really is the most applicable to this situation, because if you're writing something that sounds exactly like everybody else, you're not differentiating yourself, or you're not thinking about how to really kind of innovate. And at the end of the day, innovation comes after people trust you. And when I say people trust you, it's your brand, it's your company, it's your CEO or chief marketing officer or CGO, chief growth officer. It doesn't really matter what the position is, but when you're in the C-suite, you have to build a digital footprint that takes your brand and really extrapolate it into a point where people say, wow, this person is thinking, this people is reacting, and this person is bringing new ideas to the table. And even if we disagree with the points that they're making, they're credible.
Right.
And that digital trust becomes the largest asset that one can have.
Exactly. So then how would you recommend a tech CEO start building that trust and building that thought leadership on their own? Do you have any simple, not hacks, right? Because all the hacks are basically shortcuts, and shortcuts don't really get you very far, right? But I'm talking about actual tried and true tested strategies that they can use to actually start somewhere.
I think that the most effective way for tech CEOs to really kind of get in that arena is really to start by using storytelling or in story origin. I think every one of us, including you and me and many of the successful American dreams that we're surrounded with, and look at who's the CEO of Google and heads of Microsoft and a lot of different people that came from different backgrounds. So we used to think that a different background is a liability. In fact, it's the biggest asset that you have.
Right.
So first is really kind of embrace where you came from, embrace your values, embrace your culture. And then the second part is take that and answer the question, why not only did you start a company, but why do you believe that this technology will evangelize itself into something that is good for the human race? And then when you have that humanity expressed, then you can go to your kind of content area and talk about the future. Most of the clients that I engage with at the Borenstein Group are really clients that are asking me, should I write about what we have now? And I said, no, write about the things that might happen in 5 years. You could be completely wrong, but you're always going to be right because you put your ideas out there. And of course, not proprietary ideas, but things that make people think. So these are the things that typically work really well. And most of the folks that I read on LinkedIn are CEOs of companies that are small or mid-size or enterprise on the kind of low end that are making noise because they're bringing something new to the table.
Right. Right. So bring something new to the table. I mean, I guess there are a lot of people out there who might even question what are they bringing to the table when they're maybe the umpteenth cybersecurity firm in small and medium size. Like, how can they better understand what their unique story is, what their unique idea set thoughts are compared to the rest?
Well, I would think about it as a marketing theology. If marketing was a religion, if you will, there are people over time in history that thought that there's only one religion and it's theirs. And the famous outcry or battle cry when you go to war around the world, it doesn't matter what religion is, God is on our side. Well, God may be on your side, but there are more than to it. It's actually understanding that you coexist with other cultures, with other religions. If you take the word religion and replace it with the ethos of the company and with the beliefs, and then put it in literally a chart and match it up with your competitors, 80% of the time we find out that there's nothing unique. Everybody believes that employees should be productive. Everybody believes that we have the best culture. We have our people are our assets. I can basically give you 100 cliches that people put on their websites that meets the mail, but in fact doesn't make any impact whatsoever. So connecting that passion that CEOs have and making it work with how does that origin story and then what you are producing in technology in your individual persona, how does that basically create a new story that could be connected to the human need to improve?
Right.
Because all technologies at the end of the day improve something. They might destroy something that needs to be improved. They might augment something that needs to be improved. But at the end of the day, that's really the bottom line of how successful technologies ever got beyond being kind of a spaghetti on the wall, if you will.
Right. That's an excellent point. Because there are those fundamental things that actually don't change about human nature, regardless of the situations or the macro, the micro context. So, okay, question then. So let's say we're seeing a lot with AI recently, and I've seen it because I've also built systems like this just as an experiment, where AI can replace the deliverables of, let's say, a marketing team for the most part. To the same expertise? No, nowhere close. But I'm wondering then, those type of systems, I mean, those are inevitable. I'm wondering how, of course, you guys are thinking through AI, how you're applying it. But then second to that, how you would even consider the augmenting factor of systems like that for your team, how the future that you foresee after that.
So if you're asking what is the kind of the future and how we view it now, I would say that we view AI as a kind of an enabler of productivity and an assist that definitely has huge advantages, because the kind of typical example in the marketing agency is going to be the client asks you to research a bunch of companies, and you can spend 20 hours going to one URL to the second URL to the fourth URL and get only the impressions that you get as an individual without knowing what people said about that company, what their financials look like, have they ever been sued. If you're in PR, that's important to know. And now you can just go to OpenAI or Perplexity or any of the companies that can design a specific application and put the same information, and it will bring you everything from all the way from Dun Bradstreet all the way to what the other companies are presenting. And then I can ask them, put it in a chart and show me the greens and the reds and the things that are identical. Now, I have to make that judgment call beyond that. And I can click on the link in the AI system to make sure that it's real and it's not basically what we call hallucinating or problem that a lot of the AI engines have. But we are teaching the systems to actually think like we do, with the idea that substance never basically will be replaced by a robot. But in that respect, we can do literally 10x productivity in a day by looking at competitive research or writing an outline from a meeting. I'm a huge fan, for example, of Otter.io, which essentially listens along with you. And the ability for me to listen to a conversation with another client during a conversation instead of writing notes repeatedly, and then I'm sitting after 6 meetings in a day, what is the likelihood that you're going to say, I can't remember what this person said, or there was a valuable contribution? And what are the to-dos that are coming out of it? We all like to pretend that we can do it 5 or 6 times a day, but in reality, it depends on the level of caffeine, level of interruptions that come from the 300 emails and the sticky notes and Slack messages that we all get. So I see that working out, and we're a big proponent of it. But at the end of the day, you have to check the resource and the source where it comes from. As it relates to the future, I think especially for the marketing and digital communication industries, it's going to become the new way to really kind of reach mass audiences in a very tailored and specific way. A few years ago, it was called mass customization, which was a word that was applied to direct mail. Because direct mail, people basically, you would send a postcard or a letter saying you should buy from us something. That cost about $1 between printing piece of paper, sending it through the USPS system. Now it's being replaced by something that is a brain that is intelligent enough to tell you that if you're advertising on Facebook or Google or anywhere else, you can have a profile of the behavior, of the level of acceptance, and all the demographics and behavioristics that really kind of define
Right.
what you're trying to communicate and to whom. So there's going to be a lot more mass customizations happening, which will increase the ROI for smart advertisers and marketers. And at the same time, we're going to see probably a lot of what we call the traditional ad agencies going out of business, simply because the old model was based on you grow bigger by selling media and almost exist by creating ideas. And then by buying media, you get paid for your ideas.
Yeah.
We're moving into an environment, I think we're already there, where it doesn't really matter what media you're buying because the media now wants to own itself and want to get paid directly. So smaller companies can be bigger companies in the blink of an eye.
100%. Funny enough, mass customization. I remember back in architecture school. I mean, I didn't know much about marketing back then. All I knew is I loved architecture. I loved buildings. But in my research, I came across this idea of parametricism. Basically, they were designing buildings using algorithms, and it blew my mind, right? And then I was like, wait a second. Fourth Industrial Revolution, AIs, cryptocurrency, all these type of things. I was like, okay, so mass personalization is going to happen. I mean, in the end, we're going away from mass manufacturing. We're going to mass personalization. I think marketing is one of the first places we're going to end up seeing, and we're seeing it now. I'm even experimenting with it too, because it's possible now to customize and build launch entire landing pages for a particular person based off a particular conversation, and build apps using Lovable, whatever it is, API, custom to that conversation. Let's say if you're a custom software development agency. It's just, it is now possible for sure. But it's not going to stop. There's going to go into products as well, I believe, when manufacturing actually catches up.
Yes, and manufacturing is catching up. I'll just give you an example. We have a client that figured out how to make the printing connected to AI to help the military know how to produce spare parts for machines that haven't been manufactured for 30 or 50 years. And you still basically need a little bolt or a little widget somewhere that you would have to pay millions of dollars and send it probably to China to get manufactured. And now it's being replaced by connected to 3D printing to the right material to produce that widget in minutes, and inventory it, make sure that people know what the ingredients are. And that's a really kind of a relevant example that will probably revolutionize the parts and the supply chain issue that we're having right now, regardless of which country we're working with. There are things that we have to own in America in order to keep our knowledge level and our ability to really kind of move the world forward. I always looked at America really as the leader, not just in innovation, but really kind of cultural innovation, in the sense that anything that happens here happened in Europe, for example, being like the first world 5 to 10 years later. And now, because of kind of the global village that we live in, innovations are coming and going really, really fast. But the one advantage that we have is that we see things that could be done at scale, and we continuously challenge each other as a society to say what's right today doesn't have to be right tomorrow. And all the dogmas in any part of the culture that we have continuously being challenged, because we're a country of innovators, we're a country of challengers, and there's no finite answer where we stop and say we're perfect. And I think that is what being born in America is really representing. It's so far ahead of what other kind of countries can do, but together, whatever humanity wants to accomplish, I think AI is going to be a major player in it. And no, I do not believe that the robots are going to take over the world like in the iRobot movie with Will Smith. I think it's really a function of understanding the human behavior, which again, a robot may not be able to do. But like the joke about marketing that I always tell first-time clients, and they say, well, how much should we spend? And they said, well, think about marketing was equivalent of going to a dentist. And the dentist basically has to maintain your hygiene twice a year, ideally. And they really don't care if you're happy or sad. You have to do it. So that behavior, innovating, but then always kind of being able to challenge the conceptual existence that you have, really is where all this new world is going to come from. And the people that are foolish enough to think that they can just basically type everything and then the robots will generate great things, it might generate the scale and the mass, but not the customization. So you need good people with good minds and good brains. So I reject completely that fear that will be replaced.
Yeah, I don't think we will be in a lot of ways. Actually, I just posted about this earlier today. Do you know Klarna, the company?
Yes.
Yep. So they in 2024 they shifted 100%. They wanted to replace all of their customer service reps with AI. Lo and behold, the AI could handle 2/3 of the request of the issues, but that last third, those were all edge cases that it just couldn't handle because it didn't have the context of the reasoning, the complex understanding that a human being can bring to those situations, and the EQ as well. And I think if anything, I think it's telling, right? And it shows that there is an edge in that edge case where AI can no longer predict, because ultimately it's a prediction machine, right? If where it no longer can predict, that's where humanity belongs, exploring at the edge, probably living in the future in some capacity.
Yep. And, when you drive a Tesla, for example, or whichever driverless car you're going to drive, you realize that, as long as the highway is straight, it does great. But if you go into a construction area zone and use Waze, it's going to basically be completely confused because you need the human sensory interaction.
Right.
And that's where you got to hold the wheel and pray that, the robot is not going to take you completely into a wall.
Exactly. So, I mean, beyond like those glitches in the current now like symbiotic relationship we're forming with AI, I mean, it will become in a lot of ways, I think, an era of abundance. There's going to be a big shift for a lot of people, and the people who don't make the change will. I mean, there are unfortunately consequences to not adapting, but ultimately, human beings, even if they don't want to adapt, they ultimately have to adapt.
Of course, and especially in service industries and knowledge industries, I think that again, people are taking a very kind of offensive look at, or being offended by the fact that AI could think like they do in terms of productivity, or do 10x of what they can do per day, instead of thinking about how can I use that to my advantage to actually get promoted in the company because I found a way to take this productivity tool and actually help a company succeed. And I think that's going to be the new kind of survival of the fittest. The next generation that is kind of born with AI is definitely going to basically ask, why do you even have to think about using AI? They may not call it AI in 5 or 10 years. They might basically view it as intelligence, period. That integrates different elements just the way in the old world. And I remember we had a pre-conversation about the Gutenberg press, and it revolutionized how people, were reading and replicating, but you still needed to know how to read.
Right.
And that's really what I challenge everybody to do, is to really think about how AI can benefit your organization instead of thinking about how it's going to replace you, because it's going to replace you if you do nothing and stop thinking and stop learning. And never stop learning. That is the biggest takeaway that I can tell you over the years of being in an agency where ideas come and go all the time, is when we think we know everything, we know nothing.
Right. There's a bit of humility in that too, right? Well, phenomenal. I think we're about 10 minutes over time, but I couldn't help myself, honestly. So last quick question, because you've experienced a lot, because the story that you have, I mean, it's moving in a lot of ways. I wanted to ask, what would you say for everybody who is maybe at the beginning of their journey or going with like in the middle of it? What would be the biggest piece of advice that you can give them?
Whatever people tell you, do the opposite. That is really the single most important thing, is to be a contrarian, because if you're part of the conventional wisdom, you're not bringing anything new to the table. I'm not talking just technology. I'm talking about concept development, thinking. When you're bringing a new idea to the market, don't listen to people that say no. If you do listen to people say no, ask them why and how, and try to really not be emotional about it, which is very hard for entrepreneurs to do, and say, they said that we sucked. Well, you might have been completely sucking this day, but tomorrow, if you basically analyzed and took away the ego and put your ego aside and thought about the idea, you might actually get a revelation that will save you a lot of grief and a lot of months of redo of something that insights can give you. Right. But for me personally, and I'm sure for you as well, is not really kind of falling into the negativity, not falling into a situation when somebody says no. They might say no for different reasons. And most of the reasons are not related to actually what you are producing. My recommendation to anybody who's starting a company or is trying to kind of get to the next level is to surround yourself with people that actually want you to be successful. Do listen to objections and separate the ego from the real feedback. And then be a contrarian and think, why would people not accept my idea? What is standing in my way? And most people would think the answer is money. Money is rarely the reason that ideas don't take off. It's inability to translate it into value, which brings trust, which brings money. And if you look at OpenAI, I think that's the story there. Nobody started with $1 billion, but look at where OpenAI is.
Right. Great piece of advice. Okay, Kyle. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Everybody, if you're a mid-sized or small enterprise, if not just general enterprise level tech company, especially ones who are looking to work with the government, look up Borenstein Group at, I think it's borensteingroup.com, right?
Yes, it is. And the group is now a big company.
Yeah, it's a big company.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you again. And also, funny enough, I'm actually serving the small B2B tech firms out there. I add $1 million to your firm in 12 months, results guaranteed. So if you're looking for that, if you're small, then let me know. If you're big, go to Gal. He knows how to do it. All right, everybody. Till next one.
Thank you.